Welcome to the Plan to Eat podcast, where I interview industry experts about meal planning, food, and wellness to help you answer the question, what's for dinner? Hello, and thank you for joining me for another episode of the Plan to Eat podcast. Today, I have an interview with Emmanuel Laroche, who, for his day job, is the VP of Marketing with a global manufacturer of flavors in the food and beverage industry. But he is also the host of a popular podcast called Flavors Unknown. And he has also written a book called Conversations Behind the Kitchen Door. Today, I got to talk to Emmanuel about his heritage of being French and the influence that his family played on him getting into the food and culinary industry. We talked about the role of immigration in American food culture and what he has seen through the conversations he's had with different chefs and culinary experts. He gives some great advice for how to really easily include international flavors in your everyday cooking. I really enjoyed this interview, and I hope you enjoy it too. Hi, Manuel. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you, Ronnie, for having me. I'm really excited to be on your show. It's great to have a conversation with you.
So why don't we just get started by having you tell the audience who you are and what you do?
I cannot lie. I cannot say I live in Jersey and I'm so Central Jersey. People are not going to believe you, listening to my accent and my name either. So I've been, 21 years in the US, and I'm American and French. But I guess I'm going to keep the accent. So I have to live with that. Born in France. I lived there until 2002. My kids were born in France, and we arrived as a family. My kids were 10, 6, and 4 to New Jersey. And the reason why it's because the company I work for transferred me to the US at that time. So I'm in charge of marketing for a company that manufacture flavors for the food and the beverage industry. And there was an opportunity to create the marketing team in the US. And I had a previous experience working in the US. After I graduated, I had a Master of Chemistry and an MBA, and I went for a year in Wisconsin. That was really different, but I really loved it. I loved the pace of the business in the US, and I said, hey, one day I want to go back. And it happened. So I was very excited. And so through my let's say day job, I've been in contact with the world of chefs, and I've always been fascinated the world of chefs since a young age, and maybe we'll come back to that. But I started moderating panel discussions, with chefs for my day job, and I wanted always to dig more into their world. And I was excited to launch a podcast in 2018 called Flavors Unknown, where I have genuine conversation with acclaimed chefs and pastry chef mixologists from around the country. And in 2022, I published a book about some of those conversations, plus my own experience, called Conversations Behind the Kitchen Door. So in a nutshell.
You do a lot of things. So you made it very succinct. Yeah. So let's go back to what got you interested in, going into the industry of food and the culinary industry in general.
Yeah, I think that's, as I said, I went to first, chemistry and because that's probably what I liked or disliked the least, I want to say, maybe from all the discipline that I took when I was in France, in high school and college. At the end, I really wanted to understand the business. So that's why I went to, having an MBA. But the food has been always part of my life. Born in a French family with a mother that, loved to cook. My father was really passionate about wine. I'm the youngest of the family, so I had 2 brothers and a sister. My brother were into as well, wine and foods. Same thing with my sister. So, food was ubiquitous at home, and that was part of our family dinners on the weekend. And I was always drawn to it and spend time with my mom in the kitchen. And she taught me, in fact, how to cook when I was a kid. 7 years old. She told me how to work on the quiche, Lorraine from scratch. She was from that region, so that was nice. And I had an uncle, her brother had a hotel and restaurant in the Jura region of France. Some people heard about that. So Jura, about that region, because there's a lot of natural wine now coming from,
Mm.
from that region in France. So a lot of Americans, have heard about at least, those four letters because of that. But I spent a lot of time when I was a kid, and until when I was probably a young teenager, and unfortunately after that he passed away. So that closed the door of that world that sounded like very mysterious and excited to me. So I spent a lot of at least several weeks on summer vacation at this place. So that's probably the bug of a linear of food between my mom and my uncle. That's I took that bug of with me. So
Yeah, that's I read the introduction to your book and you talk about that process of her
yes.
teaching you how to make the quiche Lorraine, which is really I think it's really special and it's very interesting. So many of the people that I've talked to on the podcast who have gone into the food industry have an experience like that where somebody in
Hmm.
their life really nurtured their love for food. It's really a special memory that you have.
Yeah, and I do mention it. I think throughout the book that I think it's important for being a parent or a grandparent is to invite their kids or their grandchildren in the kitchen and spend time with them and show them some of like the ABC of cooking or of pastry or baking. I think this is the memory that they always kept. They will keep with them. I kept all those memory, with me. Maybe one part of in life, I forgot about them, but now, in the process of course, of writing the book and, all those memory came back to life. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, this is, things that maybe I found like being very superficial, and I mentioned in the book, I still remember my mom, dotted the dough of the quiche to make sure that there's no air bubble, and she was really patiently doing this and showing this to me. And as a kid, I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. I just want to put like the liquid, with the eggs there. Why should I do all of this? And of course, now looking back, I'm like, okay, that was part of the tradition, and she showed it to me, and I still do it. I do a lot of quiche at home, and that's important. So every little detail is important. So parents, grandparents, bring your kids to the kitchen. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, and even if you felt like that wasn't something that you thought of very much before you wrote your book, it clearly influenced the
Hmm.
trajectory of your life and, being very
Yeah,
passionate about food. And so, yeah.
for sure. But always, even when I was in marketing for a food and ingredient company in Europe, and I was always lucky to travel, and I love travel. That's I think another things that my parents showed me, and that I was part of the lifestyle. I would say, and I understand sometimes it's not easy, but because it might cost a bit of money. But my mom didn't work at that time, and my dad was a French teacher, so but they always made sure that we visit different parts of France, so we went to other European countries, and I understand distance were a bit shorter over there. But so for me, it's discovering for me discovering those culture, happened through foods. So food. So that was another connection that I had with food, and discovering this like they eat something very different in the UK that we eat in France or, in Germany. So that was
Right.
pretty.
Yeah, in your, world travels, just in general, maybe not so much as a kid, but did you have a favorite destination for food that you would recommend?
That's a good question. Thing is, I'm always passionate about a lot of things. So I always find, my kids always said that you always find something that you love wherever you go. But I have to say, probably Japan is probably the one in the book I mentioned, that I always, I took like I have three children and I always took them into one destination that they wanted after they graduated, from high school or from, college. And I took my younger son. In fact, that was the trip I did with the youngest, and we went to Japan. And I think I discovered obviously the world of ramen, the world of sushi. It's elevated to another level. But I think that's what fascinated me the most and inspired me the most is like the street food, because we hear the street food from a lot of country, but we don't really hear too much from Japan. I mean, the people that are experts, maybe they do, but for me, the spending time in Tokyo and Osaka, especially, and having access to a lot of the skewers that they are doing, a lot of the the bowls with that are filled with octopus and that for me like really excited me a lot, in terms of food and especially my taste buds for sure. So yeah, people should go to Japan. I know it's a little far, but it is it's a fantastic destination, and people there are really amazingly nice. So that's probably one of my best trip, in fact.
Great. That's on my list. It's already been on my list, so that's just more of an incentive to go, I think. So let's talk a little bit about your podcast. It's called Flavors Unknown. What's the story behind that name?
Yeah. Obviously I am, in the world of flavors, and so flavors is part of my life since, I started working. And because we manufacture, natural flavors and natural extracts for the food and the beverage industry. But as well, when you think about the world of chefs, what they want to achieve is in a dish or even, in a dessert or mixologists in a drink is really this balance of flavors. That's, the important aspect, balancing with like the key taste of, sweet, sour, salty, acid and umami and so on. So flavor was for me, people don't really spend enough time to understand behind the scene, what inspire like a dish, what inspire a drink, why chefs or mixologists thought about that combo, of flavor. And when I go to a restaurant, I annoy always the people and the guests that are with me or my family, because I'm going to go in the menu and I'm going to really focus on the one combo, the one flavor that I haven't experienced. That's what drawn me to, what I do and my passion. So that's the flavor part. And the unknown, it's because, yes, so there's two reasons for it. There's one, because for me, it's like the creativity aspect is let's discover like something new that we don't know in the world of flavor. And then the other piece is it's just happened that Anthony Bourdain was, someone I was looking up to for what he has done, in this country in terms of bringing international cuisine, to the masses. And he passed away, I would say a few months before I launched the podcast.
Hmm.
So for me, it was like, okay, unknown is the way to go, because he had this show called Parts Unknown. So it was kind of an homage, to for Anthony Bourdain.
Oh, that's really wonderful. You have talked to, chefs and culinary experts from all over the world. Um, and you took a lot of that information and put it in your book. That was the purpose of your book, was to like you said earlier, to kind of distill some of that information. What was it about that information that you felt what made it so that it was like necessary to be in a book and not just on the podcast?
You have a podcast, so you know that having a podcast, recording a podcast, publishing a podcast is one element. Promoting the podcast and bringing that to the audience, is the second step. And people don't think about it, especially when you talk to young people that want to, or people that start a podcast, they said, okay, I'm ready to go, but no one is listening. So, you need to bring those people in. And for me, having a book was one of the objective is that is a way to expand the horizon in terms of reach, in terms of audience, and bring more people to the podcast. So there was one aspect. The other aspect as well is, let's back up a little bit, is that um, when I arrived to this country 21 years ago, and obviously I spent my time discovering, the food culture. I always, the first 2, 3, 4, 5 years that you're here, all your friends from France, your family from France wants to come over. I live close to Manhattan, so of course, touristic place. So you have always visitors, and then which is not the case anymore, as often. But it's interesting because they were like, we don't understand. Where's the food culture here? People eat pizza, they eat hamburger, they eat hot dogs. And then I started to talk to them about, yeah, but there is, this dish or there's that desserts and so on. I said, yeah, but this is not American. This is Chinese influence, or this is Indian influence, or, and, I was kind of confused. It was like, I was new in the country. I started traveling, but, as not as extensively I've done, after 21 years. So I was not sure how I would answer to it. I was frustrated. And then with all the conversation after that I had on the podcasts, I'm like, okay, now I can answer. I'm going to write a book, and this is an answer to those people that have no idea what is the culture of food in the United States. That if you spend the time to travel, to go past those, fast food chains, and it's very rich. There is like specific dishes from one region to another. There is specific ingredients that grows like in different part of the country. And then you have, which for me was the way to answer my family and friends from France, is the culture of food in America is driven by the history of immigration.
Mm.
And in fact, this is what it is. America is, a country of immigration. And if it started at the beginning with Western Europe and China, there's a law that changed in 1965 that, in fact, opened the door for other countries to come in. So people from Latin America, people from other countries, from Asia, and so on. So suddenly, a lot of things happen because a lot of those immigrants, most of the time, open, like a food shop, and maybe it could be basics, but this is their way for them to, to get some income. And in fact, when you look back, fast forward, every time I go, Smorgasburg in, when you heard the name, like this is kind of a big food events that takes care. There's several in the country. There's one in LA for sure. There's one in Brooklyn, and you have like 100 vendors that come like on Saturday, and they have like, not food trucks, but they have like different, stalls. And when I look at this, and I can go from one to another. One is maybe like Thai influence, another one is going to be Moroccan influence, another one is Mexican, another one is arepas, maybe from Colombia, and so on. For me, it's really almost like, here's the representation of what's that change of law in 1965 did, to the food scene in America today. I have it in Brooklyn. It's there, in Smorgasburg. So that's, that was for me the main drivers for like writing the book.
Well, I imagine I live in Colorado, and
Okay.
our, at
Denver?
least in the just north of Denver, yeah.
Okay.
And our town is not, I wouldn't say, very diverse with food. We have a
Mhm.
lot of American pubs. But I'm certain that on the East Coast, particularly around New York City, there's so much diversity of food just for like the population of people being so much greater there. But you used the word fusion a couple different times in there.
Mhm.
And so I'm curious, like, what your take is on people immigrating to the United States and they're cooking their traditional food. But like, how does it get influenced by either American food or maybe the American palate? Like, how does that
Sure.
fusion work for a lot of people?
So I think you need to distinguish like the people that immigrate and the people that are maybe like the chef now that are part of the diaspora and that they
Mhm.
are like the second or third generation. I think that's this two different styles. In fact, maybe to symbolize it and try to illustrate it, if you take American Chinese food, for instance, this is like the adaptation of some of the dishes, and some even of them doesn't exist in the Chinese culture. But when Chinese immigrants arrived, they had to adapt. They had to adapt because they had different ingredients. The
Mm.
broccoli was not the same broccoli. It is the Italian broccoli. It's not the broccoli from China. So it's a different taste. Or they had to adapt, the level of, spiciness and to the American palate. So and it became this American Chinese food, which in fact only exists in America. That's part of almost like American, food culture, like pizza, or, it's so that's interesting. So that's for me one aspect. And so there's fusion because it's adapting some recipes to the local ingredients or to the taste of the locals here, the American. And then you have after that what we see today, which I think is fantastic. It's like bubbling everywhere, which are the second or third generation of chefs that have a background of their family comes from Thailand, they comes from Philippines, they come from Mexico, from Peru, and then so it's interesting when I talk to most of them, their family, when they arrived here, in fact, wanted them to assimilate. So they were not really like experimenting or even tasting. They were tasting American food and eating American food. And then when they had their education, most of the time, culinary education was a French style of, culinary education. And then at one moment, they decided to reconnect with their roots. They went back to Peru. They went back to Thailand. They went back to, Mexico. And then they took some of those interesting, maybe like culinary techniques that were different from the one they grew up with or they learned. And they started to bring that into their menu, but they grew up in the US. So in fact, they started to connect. It's not like really authentic Peruvian because that's not what they are interested in. And they grew up with eating American food. So they are blending some of the American ingredients where they are so local. So it would be maybe like if you have a restaurant like in Denver, for instance, and it's, American and Mexican person from second or third generation, they are going to look at some specific ingredients that you have in the Colorado area, and there's fantastic ingredients there. And then they are going to, blend this with maybe like a French techniques because they learn the French technique. And then as well, they want maybe to add, a specific like, or maybe it's based on a recipe from Mexico. So there's that. So it's not like the old fusion idea where you did not know what it is at the end, when you have on your plate. Here, it's really very specific. It's blending local ingredients with a certain techniques and with a certain, maybe a recipe in mind. And they play with that. So I think it's fascinating. At least for me, it is.
Oh, that's super interesting. I hadn't thought about that idea that it could be there could be multiple influences on one dish. That you could obviously have like local ingredients at but that the
Mhm.
technique that somebody would use that they learned as their culinary style might be different from the actual like cultural influence of the actual dish. That's super fascinating that all of those three things could be slightly different.
An example that exists for me that is fascinating is, and it is not in the U.S., but it is brought in the U.S. But Um, Peruvian food is, in fact, the fastest growing culinary or cooking influence, in the US at the moment. The fastest is Peruvian food. And when you look at Peruvian cuisine, there's a lot of influences there in Peru. There is the Spanish, that came. when you look, it's a story of immigration. You have to think about it. You cannot avoid it. That's the way it is. Sometimes it's forced. Sometimes it's through like very difficult moments. It could be a war. It could be an occupation, from a country to another. But there's always influence of food, and there's an outcome of it. So the Spanish, conquistadors like arrive. So influences on certain ingredients, there, like olive, for instance, like olive grows in Peru, and there's a fantastic olive sauce because of the Spanish influence from 100 years back. And then you have a wave of migration coming from China. So there is a typical Peruvian cuisine called chifa. That is the Chinese Peruvian combination. And then after that, there is the Japanese influence, because there's been an immigration of Japanese people in Peru. In fact, the Japanese community in Peru is the second largest in the world after Japan.
Wow.
So then if you look, and I want to use that as an example, ceviche, which is a typical dish from Peru, where the fish or seafood were cut into cubes and pieces and were replaced into, lemon juice to start like a little bit of the cooking, if you want, the action of the lemon juice and the acidity on the fish. So he really gives like, a specific way, for the ceviche. But now the immigrants from Japan and the chefs there from Japan taught the chef from Peru that you can cut the fish differently. You can cut your fish like a sashimi. And then, in fact, to preserve like the fresh taste of fish, that you are going to add the acidity at the last minute of serving. And this is now what we call the tiradito. So if you go to, and you see that, maybe not where you live, but on the East Coast, on the West Coast, there's a lot of Peruvian restaurants in Atlanta as well. There's a lot of Peruvian restaurants, and they have on the menu ceviche and tiradito. So it's an illustration of the history of immigration in Peru that now is coming here because of the Peruvian chef, or the chef that have a background, in Peru and Peruvian family, that are like the second or third generation, of immigrant here in the US. They are bringing all of this, all those excitement of, new flavors and so on into the American, landscape. So.
Wow, that is really fascinating.
Sorry, I know I never can shut up when I talk about food, so you have to stop me.
I love it. No, I really love it. It's so cool to hear that, and because I've seen, obviously I've had ceviche, but I've seen those things on the menu before, and sometimes you look at it and you're like, I don't actually know what's this one and
Yeah,
what's this one. Like, I don't know which one I should get.
sure.
So it's interesting when you know the backstory of something. It makes it much more. You appreciate the experience more when you
Hmm.
understand the backstory of it. So I'm curious if you have any ideas for people who are just at-home cooks, at-home chefs, like hearing about, international flavors and like how these different cuisines can develop. Do you have any tips for how everyday people can include a little more international flavor in their cooking?
Well, yeah, I know it seems always like overwhelming. Oh, how do I start? And it's complicated. There's a lot of ingredient that I don't have. So yeah, for sure. Um, but I work a lot. My day job, I travel a lot, and sometimes I don't have a lot of time for me, to prepare dish, and food when I come back home. So I have always ways of doing this. So yes, you need to have specific ingredients, and if you want, I can give you maybe like 4 things that I have in my pantry that I can add, on a simple dish. It could be on a salad. It could be on eggs, and fish. And I turn that dish. So think about like a recipe that you would do for yourself, like the one that but then you want to maybe integrate like one element that is going to bring that dish to a different space,
Hmm.
and a different influence. So I don't know if there's a combo of spice that call from the Middle East that's called zatar. Probably you've heard about it.
Uh-huh.
It's ZA apostrophe ATAR. It's in fact, it's a blend of herbs, and there's a little bit of nutty character, a little bit of crunchiness because there's sesame seeds. So you need to like sesame, otherwise that's an issue. You have dry sumac, as a spice, a little bit of oregano, a little bit of thyme. Uh, that for me, I have always, and you can find it in any spice shop. Um, I use it in a lot of things. I do a salad, like a simple salad with some mixed greens, some boiled eggs, some maybe like chicken and so on, and I just sprinkle it, on top, or sometimes if I make croutons, I will put that with the croutons that I had in the salad, and it is so aromatic, and it's really going to give you kind of an introduction to the taste of the Middle East without changing anything else, you know? So that's one thing's very easy for me. Another one that I always have, on my pantry is chili crisp. Because chili crisps, it's like kind of the buzzword at the moment. You see it
Hmm.
popping up everywhere. Every restaurant do their own version. Some shops are making it and they sample it, and or you can buy it from like in jar. So it's really spicy. So you need to like spicy, but it's spicy, crunchy. There's a little bit of garlic in there, and sometimes there's different influences. You can have like the Chinese influences when it's like red chilies and Szechuan peppers, and then or you can have sometimes a Mexican version of it when you have more jalapeno or serrano habanero peppers. And then again, same thing. I put this. It gives like the spiciness and as well the crispiness, and some crunchiness. So that I love. The other one is, so that's the second one. The third one is salsa matcha, which is coming from Mexico, and it's Veracruz, region origin. And again, it's a little bit of the dried chili with garlic and nuts, and all of this is fried, so it's in oil, and you can drip it in salads. On salads, you can, if I do like an egg sandwich, for instance, with ham or turkey or and so on, I will do like put like a little spoon on it, inside the sandwich, and I love it. And then the last one, which is I in fact, brought it back. I was in Hawaii not too long ago. I visited my daughter there, and then Japan influence is very strong there. So there's one ingredient called furikake, and it's Furikake, and this is toasted sesame seeds with seaweeds like the nori pieces, herbs, fish flakes, and so on. And again, I use that on usually a salad when I do a mixed salad. Doesn't matter what it is, and you can put it on omelets. That's very good as well. And then suddenly you have like a little bit of the taste of Japan on your plate. So four different things. One is like Middle East, Japan, Chinese, Mexican, and then you can play with that. And it's just like so. I think for what I would say for people is like, don't be shy to incorporate, those ingredients, even if you don't have to make a complete Mexican dish or a
Mm.
complete Middle Eastern dish. Don't go that route. Do your traditional recipe and start incorporating, that multicultural aspect with some of those key ingredients that you are going to find in a spice store, that you are going to find in, you know, um, like in a sauce aisle or like a condiment. So when you shop, explore those aisles, or visit ethnic markets, that it's interesting. So
Yeah, I like that idea a lot because it feels really not stressful.
okay,
Just cook the way that you normally cook and
yeah,
maybe mix up the spices a little bit to try something different. You don't have to go trying to figure out how you're going to pair different flavor combinations in a unique way or that is, original to a certain area in the world. So that's a really great advice. I like that a lot.
yeah. I mean, there's yeah, I think people I see people being um, uncomfortable or not wanting to try, said, "Oh, something, what's going to happen? I mean, you know what? Maybe you don't like it, and then you try something else." But I use it even when I do like my quiche, for instance. And my mom will absolutely probably hate me for this because for her a quiche, and I said it in a book, it's only simple ingredients from the Lorraine area in France. And every time I wanted to experiment, even when I was a kid, she was like, "Nope, you cannot." I'm like, "Come on, mom." So now, sorry, mom, but I'm experimenting with it. And, so I love, for instance, and the idea is not from me, it's from like a famous baker that I had on the podcast, and it's on the book, Antonio Bashur, from Miami. He's doing like a quiche with using the croissant dough from as the dough for the quiche, which you can do it as well. Like instead of doing a big quiche, you can do individual ones. You take as well like maybe the muffin mold, that you
Mhm.
can put then a little bit of the croissant dough in each of them, and then you put like the mix, for the quiche on top, which is very easy. Um, I do not do the croissant dough. He does, like Antonio Bashur, because he's talented and this is what he does. I just buy the croissant dough at the store and I will do that, but I will use it. And you elevate your quiche so that, that's a simple way of doing it. So it's not multicultural, but yes, if you want, because it's French, originally, but it's, you can elevate your cooking by just changing one ingredient.
Mhm.
So,
What's your favorite thing to cook?
oh boy. It's like, what's my favorite children, It's like, it's like, um, I don't know what's my favorite thing to cook. You know what? I mean, quiche, yeah, that's my go-to when I have parties and so on. It's like easy. I can do, vegetable quiche. I can do quiche with like smoked salmon and goat cheese, so I experiment a lot and, with that. So I love that. Um, but I think what I love is to go to the farmers markets or the fish markets, and then usually I do one ceviche per week. So then that's probably the one, because that's another platform that you can experiment. If you have access to very good fresh, I know Denver, may, and Colorado, yes, maybe not, but still, uh, but fish or seafood. I love like scallop ceviche, for instance. So I buy fresh scallop, I slice them very thin, and then recently I went in Hawaii, and I got with my daughter, went to a restaurant there, and they had a ceviche with scallops, and they in between each slice of the scallops they put a slice of Asian pear, and I was like, I haven't thought about this, and the combo was so nice that that's my version now. So every time I do my ceviche, I always buy Asian pear, and I do a ceviche with different like red onion, um, the Asian pear, and I put like different toppings, but I obviously mix maybe some lime with lemon juice, and and that's my go-to. It's easy to make. It's healthy.
Mm. Yeah,
So
that sounds really yummy. I bet um, that, like, sour and sweet flavor
yeah,
together is really wonderful in that.
yeah. And then if when it fits in the summer, then you can then I buy basil leaves, and then I put them into like in a small blender. So I make it at a little sauce, liquid sauce that I put a little bit of olive oil with, and then, lemon and pepper. And then you can put a little bit of drops on like the scallop ceviche. Is yummy.
Mm, now I'm getting hungry. Okay, I'm really curious, is there any food that you will only eat in France because it's just not the same anywhere else, or maybe specifically not the same in the United States?
I think that's, it's a good question. In fact, I think quality of the food has evolved a lot in 21 years, that I'm here. Because of those influences that we talked, and access to, maybe people pay more attention, chefs like on the ingredients and so on. But I had a hard time when I arrived is to find like good bread.
Mm.
So, which is not the case anymore. You have like good bread, especially where I live, and not too far from the city, from New York City. So, and when I travel, I always find like good bakers. There's a culture now of course, the sourdough exploded, as we know during, the pandemic. So people are more connected to the art of making bread. So the quality of bread have changed a lot in 20 years, in the country. But at the beginning, for me, that was like difficult. Or croissant, which is very specific. Now you can find croissant, but before that, it was, they were not crisp. They need to be like really the contrast of the crispiness on the outside and then the moist, aspect on the inside. So, sorry, that's my French DNA that's comes to mind.
I was
It's,
kind of expecting it to be related to carbohydrates.
but yeah, that's and the other one was cheese. Again, that has changed a lot. Now you can find a lot of good, um, like farmer cheese, like in Vermont or in California, and that's fantastic. And I'm sure, sorry for other people listening, that maybe I'm sure there's fantastic cheeses, around the country. But it was hard for me when I love cheese, and the variety of cheese in France is it's really you know huge compared to what I could find
Hmm.
here.
Yeah.
So I have a story, in fact, when I arrive, and I hope there's no one from Wisconsin listening. But when I arrive, it was a long time ago. It was at the end of the 80s, in fact, that I came to Wisconsin in the US for the first time. My colleagues there, they welcomed me, of course, because I was coming from France. The first weekend, they said, we have to bring you to a farm and with a cheese store there. So I'm like, sure, eh. So we were there with them at the farm. And of course, when we arrived, the woman that was behind the counter, so she has different, sorry, I want to say brick of cheese with different colors, orange and like cheddar and I'm like, oh, okay. And then they were like, he's from France, so he has this culture. So she was really excited, and she went to the back and she came back with like another brick of cheese that was very, very dark. And it was like a very old age, cheddar. And I was very polite. I said that I love that cheese. So, but the things have changed now. There's fantastic, cheese. I'm so sorry. I'm just listening to just what I said. You lost like half of your audience now.
Well, it's funny because I was going to say, well, didn't you first come to Wisconsin? But I'm sure it's a different style of cheese than what you're
Yes.
used to.
Yeah. But now, I eat cheddar as well now, after 20 years, I got to eat.
Yeah, it's funny. Okay, well, before we go, why don't you tell everybody where they can connect with you, find your book, listen to your podcast, all that
Yeah,
stuff?
maybe they don't want now. I said about the cheese.
I don't think so.
But
I bet they
please,
will.
yeah, very open to any type of food. So, yeah, my podcast is Flavors Unknown. So flavors plural unknown. They can find it in any podcast platform. I publish every other week because, I cannot do every week. It's a bit too much for my day job. And I just published episode 148. And then they can see, all the information on my website. It's called flavorsunknown.com. There's like all the episodes and information on the book. So the book is called Conversations Behind the Kitchen Door. The foreword was written by Chef Elizabeth Faulkner. Is a good friend of mine. And yes, there's about more than 50. The subtitle said, 50 American chef chart today's food culture, but there's a bit more of 50 chefs there. And I try to make that book interactive. So there's a lot of QR codes where they can go back to the episodes if they like what they read about the chef but the book is definitely not the content of the podcast. It's
Mm.
much more conversations, and experience and all the learnings, from any conversation I had with chefs here in the US. They can follow me on Instagram at, again, Flavors Unknown. That's the Instagram and Facebook as well.
Perfect.
But thank you very much for inviting me to join your show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you for joining me. It's been a wonderful conversation, and I'll make sure that we link to all your things in the show notes so that people can easily
Thank
access
you.
them.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode. There will be links in the show notes to Emmanuel's podcast, his book, as well as his social media channels so that you can connect with him and listen to his wonderful podcast. And if you'd like to support the Plant Eat podcast, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review in Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I will see you again in 2 weeks with another episode, and thank you for listening.